This NFL Week 12 Thursday night football player props edition between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code MACHINE to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. We're also brought to you by Rebet. Rebet is a new social sports book available in 45 states. Download the Rebet app and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit match up to $100. And we're also brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football and the NFL with Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM.
And taking a shot to Brown downfield. He makes the catch, and he gets in for the touchdown. The catch is made by Calvin Ridley. Wilson, good as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught.
Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. NFL Week 12 kicking off on Thursday Night Football. We've got an AFC North matchup, another division matchup here between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, I should say. Intriguing matchup here. I know the Browns are pretty much out of it for the season with all the quarterback controversy or whatever you may want to call it. There, and the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off of a very, very, very impressive victory over the Baltimore Ravens as they sit in first place in the AFC North. So definitely excited to get into everything here, but I can't do it alone. Of course, I've got my guy here with me. It's ChrisBeCappinn. Chris, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up? Excited, man. We finally get a Thursday night football, we're kind of progressing through the season, but we get a Thursday night football and there's some weather conditions, which I know we'll get into. I'm excited because that's a part of the handicap here. And looking forward to week 12 here with you. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, man, like you mentioned, it's going to be a game where we are getting, obviously we're at that part of the year where obviously, the temperatures are cooling down, maybe some rain, some snow. So again, it's going to be football weather in this game. We'll touch on all that here momentarily. But yeah, I mean, look, it's two teams really just are going in opposite directions right now. Chris, Pittsburgh, I think, has been one of the bigger surprises, if not the biggest surprise thus far this season in the NFL with the way they've been able to play. And then I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to admit that I was wrong about this team, because anytime I say that there's two quarterbacks in the same room, you don't have any quarterbacks. But Russell Wilson, at least in the very small sample with the Pittsburgh Steelers, has looked really, really good for this team. Justin Fields did his part as well, right? He kept his team afloat. He was able to win the games for them, not make huge mistakes that really translate to wins. And I think that was the difference with Justin Fields. But I think we knew at some point when Russell Wilson was going to be healthy that he was going to eventually take over as starting quarterback, and that has transpired here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the really key driver in Pittsburgh Steelers fashion has been their defense, Chris, right? Because TJ Watt has stayed healthy for this team. I know they're missing a couple guys at that linebacker position, but in totality as a unit, the Pittsburgh Steelers have done very, very well, not only playing defense, but also making those plays that are the difference between winning and losing. And now you see this team led by Mike Tomlin, well on their way to another winning season under Mike Tomlin. And right now, at least in the driver's seat for that AFC North division. But we could touch on the Browns here shortly. But what have you seen from the Steelers team thus far this season that, gets you excited if you are a Steelers fan?
Yeah, you mentioned it. If you're a Pittsburgh fan, you want to do two things. You want to let your defense pin their ears back and dominate the line of scrimmage, which is what we've seen all year from Pittsburgh, primarily. And then on the opposite side, you just don't want to turn the ball over, like you mentioned, right? Two quarterbacks is always worse than one, but they figured this thing out. Even with, and you gotta, I think we give a lot of credit to coaches, but man, the coaching job is done in Pittsburgh. We gotta give Mike Tomlin a little credit here, because
100%.
Even before Russell Wilson came back, we were thinking they don't need a quarterback change. They everything is already going well, right? Like don't do that. Like don't fix the if the shoe if the shoe fits, just wear it. Don't try to change the shoe. And they changed the shoe, you know, and guess what? The new one fits too. So, and the defense is playing, you know, out of his mind. I saw that interception, that one-handed interception made by the linebacker the other day to kind of rip the ball out of I think it was the running back's hands in that Baltimore game. Who was that running back? You know, if that was
I know Derrick Henry fumbled, but
it wasn't Derrick Henry. It was
was it Ken Mitchell?
No. It was the running back. It was the running back.
Hill?
What's his Justice Hill? Hill. Justice Hill just ripped the ball out of Justice Hill's hand. I mean, that lets you know how locked in Pittsburgh is. And you know, they could have taken their foot off the gas. It was a big divisional game last week after a really big win. You know, against the Commanders in DC the week before. Like they could have easily, you know, just let it slip away, but they didn't. They hard-nosed team. They play for themselves. They play for their coach, and it's really turning to be a very successful season for a team that was listed at 8.5 wins. You know,
8.5, yeah.
Boy, yeah. Pittsburgh, hats off to them. You know.
Yeah, before we get to the Cleveland side here, look, let me remind everybody, if you haven't already downloaded the SGPN app, you're missing out, because the SGPN app gives you access to all the podcasts on the network and also the picks pages, all in one convenient app. And just like all of our content across the network, the app is absolutely free as well. All you got to do is just go to your app store, whether it's Apple or whether it is on Google Play Store, whatever the case might be. Just type in SGPN. You'll see the logo there. Just download it. Again, completely free. Get all of our content in one convenient app there. Yeah, Chris, I mean, look, the other side of this, Cleveland, I mean, this could probably be a brief conversation, but it's just really been a season where, again, quarterback issues continue to haunt this team. And have we seen Deshaun Watson possibly play his last game as a starter for the Cleveland Browns? I think that just might be in the cards there. I mean, last season, this team was very fortunate to have Joe Flacco, which led them to, a playoff spot last season. But Jameis Winston, he has had this was his third start, if I'm not mistaken, this past week against the Saints. 2 out of 3 starts have been great, but it's just this, we're not used to seeing the dominant defense that we've seen from this Cleveland Browns team. And I think there will be, some changes, especially on the offensive side for this Cleveland Browns team. We'll find out who the quarterback of the future is going to be. But right now, Jameis Winston is doing, putting out his best effort to possibly revive his careers like some of these other guys have, right? The guys that come to mind, the Sam Darnolds of the world, the Baker Mayfields of the world. Maybe Jameis Winston's trying to find his footing along the path of those guys. Nick Chubb, again, just understanding that he's coming off of that brutal knee injury, maybe still trying to find his ground as well, getting the rust off. So we see what transpires for Nick Chubb, but again, definitely a difficult task this week going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers there. So, I mean, at 2-8, not much really to talk about for the Cleveland Browns there, Chris, but I don't know if you have any thoughts for this Browns team.
No, I mean, this was another team, that had, really great expectations. I remember opening day, everybody was a little leery, wanting to take Dallas on the road. I know you remember that game.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Dallas went there, absolutely cleaned them up. I know you had some reservations. We talked about it when we did the divisional previews on how good we thought Deshaun Watson was going to be. And, we didn't kind of, beat that drum of being Deshaun Watson backers and more so wanted him to prove it. I think that whenever, you have a quarterback that is playing below average when they did have him. And of course, Jameis is, was a revelation for a week or two, but that's not sustainable long term. Whenever you have that quarterback, that is even if they can galvanize the troops, because we may not have a better galvanizer than Jameis Winston. But if the team loses that buy-in because they understand that the offense is going to struggle, it really, really hurts, and it takes a toll on teams. Trust me, as somebody that's been a Commanders fan, and we've been through 327 quarterbacks in my 25 years of being a Commanders fan, I know exactly what that feels like, So I think a little bit of it is that, because this was a team that's supposed to be, kind of hard-nosed football team that wants to run the football, has some playmakers, at the wide receiver position, and then was just going to rely on their defense. So, the defense, I think, is taking a step back because they've been on the field for such a large part of the season. Of course, you had Nick Chubb not coming in, not being ready with the team at the beginning of the season. So
right.
You mentioned 2-8, just not great overall.
Yeah, and again, they're probably looking forward to next season. Especially, I mean, look, everything is pretty much out of their reach now. Division long gone, playoff spot long gone as well. So now you look towards the future and seeing, at least offensively, who is going to be on this roster come next year. And again, quarterback conversations will definitely be in the fold there for the Cleveland Browns. All right, Chris, let's get into it here for the Thursday night football game, AFC North, Steelers, Browns. I'll let you lead it off here. I know you mentioned the weather being a factor in this game. If you want to touch on the weather, and then if you want to take us into your quarterback prop for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So the quarterback prop actually works really well with the weather. So the game is expected to be, a bit messy for people who haven't really checked out the injury report. There's messy weather conditions. We know both the Cleveland Browns play outside, so this is not, in a dome at all. Like
right.
You go to Cleveland, you got to play with the, with what's there. The wind is expected to be blowing. There's a potential for a wintry mix, which probably limits some passing opportunities. Typically when you see this, you see teams rely a little bit more heavily on the run game, and Pittsburgh likes to do nothing more than just rely on the run game. I've also read, that there's potential. Let's see, where did I put this at? There's potential for there to be some snow. So outside, even if it is not snowing, it's still supposed to be, pretty, some sleet coming down. The wind's gonna be blowing. So I think we don't see a lot of deep passes deep down the field. Like that could be a thing. But to go with the quarterback prop here, I'm actually this is a different avenue for me, but I'm going Russell Wilson under on his rushing yards. The number comes in at 12.5, and I'm gonna take a stab at Russell Wilson to go under. Looking at his game logs, I think I think we start with the game script. I don't think this is a game that Pittsburgh is, I think, currently 4-point favorites. I think in this game is road favorites here. I don't think that this is going to be a game where they're going to be necessarily playing from behind. I think they'll rely on their defense. I think they'll rely on running the football as well. So I think they'll be playing from out front, and I think they'll rely more heavily on their running backs to be able to create some of those opportunities and make some big plays with their legs. Russell Wilson has played 4 games so far this year. If he has not utilized his legs, he's actually under 12.5 rushing yards in all 4 of his games. He's only had either 3 or 4 rushing attempts per game in all 4 games so far that he's played. He hasn't run for more than 7 yards so far this season. When I look at the Browns, they played against a few mobile quarterbacks, but I'm not sure if we want to include Russell Wilson in that conversation as being mobile. The numbers so far have not been mobile. We wouldn't classify his numbers as mobile right now. Outside of those games that they've played against Lamar Jacksons of the world, the Jalen Hurts of the world, the Jaden Daniels of the world, that every other quarterback has stayed under 10 yards. They have not given up 10 yards to any of these quarterbacks that we wouldn't see, that we would say are mobile. So a lot of it is, just kind of the perfect hit rate so far, kind of looking at the Browns defense. And a big part of it, like I said, is the game script as well. I don't think we see Russell having to utilize his legs as much in this spot. If I'm expecting a lot of handoffs, and we'll get to the running back prop in just a second, but I'll lead us off with Russell Wilson under his 12.5 rushing yards. Best number available, -120. Bet365 has this, and DraftKings also has it at -120.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense about what you mentioned, right? And I think that you don't need Russell Wilson to really utilize his legs because you do have 2 competent running backs back there for the Steelers. So if you want to run the football, hand the football off to those guys and see what transpires for you. And like you mentioned, right, the 4 games that he has played hasn't gone up and over this number quite yet. So I don't think that starts here in this game either for Russell Wilson. So again, we talked about Russell Wilson at the top of the episode here. He's done a very good job. I don't want to call him a game manager, Chris, because he has made plays with his arm, of course. But I think he's played smart football, and he has 2 interceptions that he's throwing, but it's the fact that he has a high IQ for the game, but also a good grasp of what this Pittsburgh Steelers offense wants out of him. Because I think when he was with Denver, it was just, hey, it's Russell Wilson. We're expecting him to be the guy that he was when he was with the Seattle Seahawks. Just go out there, throw the football, get us 300 yards. But he really doesn't have to do that with this Steelers team because, again, they just have a different brand of football to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, yeah, couldn't talk you off of that one for sure. Chris, before I do get into my first player prop here for the Thursday night card, let me tell everyone about mybookie.ag. We're brought to you by mybookie.ag. And SGPN actually started out with MyBookie, and now we're back. Check out the new and improved website. It's great on mobile, plus props for every game and the live dealer casino. We even have, not we, but MyBookie.ag even has a new cash out option. Head to MyBookie.ag, promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000. Plus, you also get a $10 casino chip in there. That's MyBookie.ag. Promo code SGPN. And we're also brought to you by Rebet. Rebet is a brand new social sportsbook available in 45 states. A huge market of betting opportunities are available on Rebet. Easy to use and great for people in states where traditional sportsbooks may be restricted. Download Rebet in the App Store and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit match up to $100. Again, that's Rebet using promo code SGPN. All right, Chris, let me get into my first player prop here. And that'll be the quarterback prop, of course. You mentioned the Steelers not trailing in this game, which I 100% agree with. But I do think that the Browns are going to be trailing in this game. That means, of course. And I just feel like that Jameis Winston's not going to air out this football. So there's a couple different ways I could have gone here. I mean, as we speak, his yardage is currently going up for Jameis Winston, all the way up to 214.5 right now. But I like the yardage. I also like the attempts as well for Jameis Winston. I think I'm going to go pass attempts in this game here, over 33.5 for Jameis Winston. So we take a look, number one, Chris, the starts that he has made since he took over as a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns here has Jameis Winston. So let's go back to the game against the Baltimore Ravens 3 weeks ago. And in that game, 41 pass attempts for Jameis Winston, 46 against the Chargers, and 46 against the Cleveland Browns. So he's had 40 plus, of course, in all 3 games that he started as a quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And we talked about I guess we'll talk about it, kind of tipping my hand here as well, of the Steelers rush defense and how good they've been thus far this season. They're only allowing 79 yards per game on the ground, which is only about 3.97 yards per carry. But you also take a look at what opposing quarterbacks have done as far as pass attempts against the Steelers, because the rush defense has been good. So since week 5, Dak 42, Aiden O'Connell 40, Aaron Rodgers 39, Daniel Jones 38, Jaden Daniels 2 weeks ago 34, and then Lamar Jackson last week fell 1 attempt short of getting up and over this number. So I'm going to say with that, I think Jameis Winston continues to throw the football here. I think they'll show limited in that rushing attack for the Cleveland Browns here, Chris. So give me Jameis Winston over on his pass attempts. That's going to be the number of 33.5 right now for him.
Yeah, 33.5 looks pretty slight, when you give out the numbers that you just gave out. Back to back, like you said, 46 pass attempt games and a 41 pass attempt game in all 3 games that he's actually started. So I know you mentioned those numbers. And the other part of the gap is just how strong Pittsburgh defense has been against the rush. Like you said, you laid those numbers out eloquently as well. I'm not sure. This game to me feels kind of trappy, because I say this sometimes on the show where we kind of line, and either we're going to go 6-0 or we're going to go 0-6. Yeah. It feels like a game I want to shoot on, because I definitely agree with this look here as well. I like Jameis Winston. You said, what was the number for Jameis pass attempts?
33.5.
33.5. Yeah, something he's gone over 3 straight games. Love it.
All right, let's get over to our next player prop for Thursday night football. Chris, lead us off, man. What do you got?
We're going with the man, the myth, the legend, Najee Harris in this spot. Rushing yards, I like. Rushing attempts, I like. I think both of those numbers are playable. But I'll go rushing yards. 66.5 is the number. This number is actually up from 64.5. We talked about the weather conditions. I forgot to mention that the wind is also expected to be blowing about 20 miles per hour as well. I mentioned the wet and windy conditions, 42% chance of snow as well. But outside of that, like I said, the weather will be going. So that's a part of the handicap. This is also a Pittsburgh team that just loves to run the football in general. Hard-nosed football team. They run the ball second most times per contest, 34.2. 34.3 times per game. So I'm expecting Najee to have the ball. You look at his recent form, if he's been very solid, running for over 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. Last week he was limited to just 63, but that was against the best run defense in the NFL, which is the Baltimore Ravens. And this Browns defense can be very, very vulnerable against the run. They can struggle. 25th in rush in defensive rush EPA, and they're giving up 131 yards per game on the ground. The 27th in yards allowed, giving up 4.8 per pop. And there's some key linebacker information. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Jeremiah
I saw this. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah. He was possibly having to go in. I don't want to say retirement, but the injury is something that's of a serious concern for him. Let me again.
While you're looking for that, I'll also mention that Myles Garrett didn't practice yesterday either. He's dealing with a hip injury. So, I mean, it's a lot of different factors. This is just a beat up football team right now. So taking those things into consideration as well, on top of them already just being a pretty poor run, defense in general. I think Steelers like to control the game. I think the weather is, a ground heavy approach as well. And I think that leads to a lot of carries. I was surprised, to see that Najee's carries were listed at 16.5. That to me, I know it's a little juice, and it'll probably bump up to 17.5. But even with us doing the show a little earlier, because we always do it on Wednesday, and the game doesn't take place until Saturday. Until Thursday, we typically get some CLV with our bets because people aren't betting the games until the day of. However, if I'm looking at just Najee in general, just you just look at his last 5 games. And he's, had 20 plus rush attempts. I want to say in every single game. I'm pulling it up real quick because I didn't have it readily available. So 18 attempts last week against Baltimore, which is very, very telling because nobody runs the ball 18 times against Baltimore. 21 against my Commanders, 19 against the Giants, 21 against the Jets. So he's gone up and over this number 4 straight games. I don't see a reason why he does not, especially given the weather. I don't think Mike Tomlin's about to pull any kind of magical tricks out of his head and say, you know what, let's just go past the football in the weather this week, especially against a pretty poor run defense. So like I said, I like the rushing yards over. I think that's what I'm going to end up playing, but I like the attempts over 16.5 as well.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is the gentleman's name for the Cleveland Browns there. And here's I was looking at the running back rushing props as well. I was like, one of these guys is going to end up going under. And I couldn't decide between if it was going to be Najee or Jaylen Warren. But like you mentioned, with Najee getting the amount of workload that he's gotten when it comes to the rush attempts, I think I would think that if he does get up and over his rush attempts, that he does get up and over his rushing yards in this game as well. So yeah, couldn't talk you off of the Najee one. I also took Jaylen Warren in this game here, Chris, but I took his receiving yards to go over in this matchup. And you take a look right now for Jaylen Warren, number one, since he has returned from injury for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. This was something I think you and I talked about a lot last season with Jaylen Warren receiving yards. I think like he was one of our MVPs when it came to that, that particular prop bet. But it's continued this season as well, right? You take a look. The number right now is 12.5. Let me see if I can do. Chris, let me see if you can find me a better number than that. 12.5 is a number right now. I think that might be consensus. But 4 straight weeks that Jaylen Warren has played in a game for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, he's gone up and over this number. And those numbers are: he had 15 against the Jets, he had 13 against the Giants, he had 29 against the Washington Commanders, and then last week, 4 receptions, 4 targets, 27 receiving yards. We're not quite used to seeing what this Cleveland Browns rush defense was of the past. Maybe that's what, personnel being available, or, motivation may be a question as well. But you also take a look over the last 4 weeks, Chris, running backs catching the football out of the backfield against the Cleveland Browns. Zach Moss, 3 for 33. Justice Hill, 1 for 14. J.K. Dobbins, 2 for 20. and Alvin Kamara last week, 4 for 22 against the Browns. And I'll throw an additional one out there that if I do like this number to go up and over 12.5 for Jaylen Warren, Chris, I'm also going to be on his longest reception to go over 8. And I think the number was 9.5. Let me see if I can get the updated number here. So let's see. Jaylen Warren, 9.5 is the number. And quickly, I'll just read off his longest reception over the last 4 weeks. Let's see here. 12, 26, 9, 11. So I think that if he does get 2 catches, I think that he can break one out here. So I'll officially give you Jaylen Warren. I see 13.5 now over on DraftKings. But yeah, up and over his receiving yards in this game here, Chris.
Yeah, that 13.5, is I see BetMGM has no juice on it, just the -110. Just a standard big -110. But yeah, 14.5, and I see it moving to 15.5 on a couple books as well. So you probably want to get in, like you said, a little earlier. The longest reception I also saw, same thing you said, of 9.5 looks like it's available. With no juice on. It looks like a couple different books right now. So that I think is what I would like to call a Munaf special. I see 5 cent of juice on it right now over on ESPN Bet. Just the tapped in perspective of taking these running backs and not necessarily relying on them to always have to go up and over their rushing prop, but utilizing their legs out of the backfield and catching some passes out of the backfield, because we know that running backs utilize that. And in a game like this, I could see a lot of checkdowns. Wanting to get the ball out of his hands pretty quickly is Russell Wilson in this game. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I actually like both of those, honestly.
And what you mentioned as well, right, Chris, that the weather is going to play a factor in this game, that maybe you're not going to see the deep ball that Russell Wilson likes to throw, that maybe some dump offs or screen passes, Charlie check down to a guy like Jaylen Warren, who I think is their pass catching back there. So give me the Jaylen Warren up and over 13.5 receiving yards as player prop number 2. All right, before we get over to our third player props for the Thursday night football game, hey, let me tell you guys about our good friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Pick'em has one of the biggest menus for all sports: NFL, college football, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and more. And you can now use specials and boosts on all flexed entries. So sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code MACHINE. And roster brought to you by Rhythm. SGPN's prop partner Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered back sports betting platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive betting models in seconds and get predictions for betting on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top-performing models from the leaderboard, or have Rhythm build a model for you. Now you can track props in the Rhythm app. NFL picks, NFL props, college football, college basketball, and NBA. Rhythm has it all. Currently, for this matchup, Rhythm does like Nick Chubb under 52.5 rushing yards in this game. They're projecting he only has 37 in this game against the Steelers. So claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, Chris, let's get into player prop number 3 here, my friend. Lead us off. What do you got?
I'm gonna ride the hot hand here, Jerry Jeudy, he is absolutely balling. You mentioned game script, right? Like thinking that they're gonna have to be playing from behind. It seems like he has been a magnet for Jameis Winston. Last 5 games, he's averaged 69. So his receiving prop is only 44.5 right now. He's averaging 69.4 yards, and he's actually hit the over 60% of the last 5 games. He's coming off a very strong performance where he had 142 yards against the Saints last week in New Orleans. 11 targets last week. They had a bye week the week before, but before that bye week, they played the Chargers. 11 targets in that game, 7 receptions, 73 yards in that game, 8 targets the week before. He's just absolutely been on a heater here. The increasing role, of course. He has 6 explosive plays of 20 plus yards this season. And he just has the ability to be able to stretch the ball down, stretch the field, and make plays down the field. So I love that for him. Steelers defense has been very solid, but they have been giving up, big plays throughout the air just because they've been playing with the leads for most of the time. I just like his route running ability. I love that he's, super shifty, pretty fast guy. He can exploit, mismatches. So, yeah, I'm going Jared Jeudy up and over his 44.5. I thought this number was a tad bit conservative, given game script, given the targets, given the receptions, and given the yards over the last 3 weeks. So easy one for me to just kind of ride the hot hand here and think that Jared Jeudy is going to get me 45 receiving yards here.
Glad you mentioned this one because I was looking at his receptions to go up and over 3.5. It is a little bit juiced at minus 130 currently over on DraftKings, but I think the market hasn't caught up on when we have these new quarterbacks that do come in, like Jameis Winston, and their rapport and chemistry with some of these other receivers is different when what the previous quarterback had prior with some of the other wide receivers. And I think that's where the market hasn't caught up on a guy like Jerry Jeudy. And like you mentioned last 2 weeks, total of 11 targets in each of the last 2 games. That's 22 targets over the last 2 games for Jerry Jeudy. He's had at least 5 receptions in all 3 games. But more importantly for Chris, like you mentioned, the yardage has been there for him as well. At least 73 receiving yards in all 3 games since Jameis Winston took over as a starting quarterback. So it seems like Jerry Jeudy is starting to look like the wide receiver we thought he was going to be when he got drafted out of Alabama. I know it didn't work out for him in Denver there, but he may have found a home here with the Cleveland Browns here. So it's good to see him performing here and then getting the yardage here for this Cleveland Browns team. All right, Chris, I think this may be the first time in Propcast history, maybe first, maybe second, but I'm going to leave it as first. So I'm taking a page out of our good old friend Rod's book. I believe you've done this as well, Chris, given a defensive prop. It is going to be the squares prop out there, but it just made too much sense for me not to bet this and not to give this out. It is going to be TJ Watt to record a sack in this game. And right now, DraftKings has this at a quarter prop or a quarter over a quarter sack at minus 150. Bet Rivers has this at over half a sack at minus 143. So if he does get into that half a sack here, you can cash that here. Again, it's a little bit juicy. I traditionally don't give out this big number, but it just makes too much sense for me not to bet on this and give this out to the listeners. So it's simple. We know what TJ Watt is capable of doing. Obviously, multiple time winner of Defensive Player of the Year. We know the numbers with the Steelers with TJ Watt out there for this team and how successful they are. But we just take a look in his career, Chris, against the Cleveland Browns. He's played in 12 head-to-head meetings against the Cleveland Browns, of course, because they are in the same division. Like we talked about, he's recorded at least half a sack in 11 of those 12 games against the Cleveland Browns. He's recorded at least 1 sack in 10 of those 12 games against the Cleveland Browns. And I expect him to tee off again in this game against the Cleveland Browns. And typically when we see TJ Watt the most when they need those last stops at the end of the game, TJ Watt is usually that is a time where he does step up for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. So I know there's been some back and forth between him and Myles Garrett. I think both of these guys are going to want to show out against the opposing offensive line. But I do think that this is a good spot here for TJ Watt, who just has some great history against his Cleveland Browns team. And Chris, this isn't the offensive line that we're used to seeing from the Cleveland Browns from the past several years as well, right? I know they've dealt with some injuries up there, some shifting up there as well. So I think that's something that TJ Watt can take advantage of in this game here. So give me TJ Watt over. I'm going to go over the 0.25 over the quarter sack, minus 150, currently over on DraftKings as my third player prop here, Chris.
If you're not going to come on here and give out a defensive prop and I'm going to give you any pushback, like I'm pretty sure you feel pretty solid in your play here. I'll just add that, my brain doesn't even go to the defensive side of football when I'm thinking about, doing our player props, but we miss you, Rob. We hope everything is well with you because it immediately makes me think about our guy, Rob, a lot. So hopefully he get a chance to watch or listen to us. I'll just add, that you mentioned the offensive line. The Cleveland Browns have actually gotten sacked 46 times this season. You know what that ranks amongst the teams in the NFL,
I will go 22nd most.
It's the first most. They've
All right.
been sacked more than any other team in the
There we go.
NFL. makes even more sense. So I love your look over here with TJ Watt. We, like you said, we know what he's capable of doing, and I think it even motivates him more, knowing, like you said, I hadn't thought about that part of the handicap as well, but knowing that Garrett Wilson is over on the opposite side. So I love this one. Great find by you.
All right, so those are 3-player props each here. Chris, you have any honorable mentions we want to throw out there before we do get to touchdown scores in this game? Anybody we're looking to get to the window with, but just maybe needed a little tip to the hand to get to the window?
I don't think I want to play 5-player props in this game, so I think I'm just stick with the 3. But you mentioned I love your angle on Jameis to go up and over his 33.5 pass attempts. That makes a ton of sense to me. I also love what you said about what Rhythm said, right? We know Pittsburgh has been a really good run stopping defense. They run the ball. Pittsburgh wants to control both lines of scrimmage. They want you to pass the ball, and they want to be able to run the ball. That's what they want. So I love the idea of taking Nick Chubb under his 52.5 rushing yards as well. I won't go through all their box scores, but we know that they've been really good, with limited running backs, has the Pittsburgh Steelers in. Even with the conditions, I still see Cleveland playing from behind and potential rush attempts under for Nick Chubb as well. So I'll just kind of leave all 3 of those out there: Nick Chubb under his rush attempts, Nick Chubb under his rushing yards, and then just kind of piggybacking off of you with Jameis Winston up and over his pass attempts. Those were the 3 that I liked the most. I thought about field goal kicker props, but I think I'm gonna stay away from those. What about yourself? Any that you wanted to get to the window with?
Yeah, so the Nick Chubb one, I was just looking at the numbers of what the running backs have done against the Steelers. I think the only one outlier this season was actually the Giants running back, Tyrone Tracy Jr., who did have 145 rushing yards against his Steelers team. But outside of that, it's really been the elite wide receivers running backs that have gotten up and over this number, right? Jonathan Taylor, it took him 21 attempts to get 88 rushing yards against the Colts. Last week, Derrick Henry had 13 only attempts for 65 rushing yards there. And I say only because we're just used to seeing Derrick Henry walk into 100 touchdowns. 100 yards in a game. I mean, he's on pace right now. Looks like for 100 touchdowns.
I was going to say 100 touchdowns too,
Yeah, 100%. So I think, I don't know. It just feels like that. I thought last week was going to be the week for Nick Chubb to kind of look like the Nick Chubb that we're used to seeing prior to the injury. But I just think this is just a very difficult matchup for him in this game here for Chubb against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You made me curious about Chris Boswell because he's just been so good for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Trying to see if I can find what his field goal makes are in this game. Let's see if I can find anything. Would have probably be under team props, maybe. Let's see. No, I don't see anything there. Maybe not listed quite yet. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. So
1.5. I see, but juice. I see juice.
Yeah, minus 170.
I see minus 135 if you have access to Hard Rock, which I know a lot of people don't. But yeah, minus 160 on Caesars and a minus 165 on BetMGM.
Is kicking points 6.5? So that'd be what, 2 touchdowns,
two field goals.
Two field goals, an extra point. I think that's definitely the possibility, or even 3 field goals will get that done for you. But he's just been so good for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Let me just quickly see here before we get to touchdown scores. Chris Boswell. So at least at home this season, on the road this season, didn't have anything against the Commanders. 4-4 against the Raiders without was indoors. 1-1 against the Colts. Did have 3 extra points in that game, only equated to 6. But he's had 13 or more points in 4 of the last 5 games here, Chris. So I think that maybe if you want to take a look at that, I'll leave it at that for honorable mentions. All right, let's get into touchdown scores before we get to best bets to wrap up the show here, Chris. Who do we like to find the end zone? Let's keep in mind that the total for this game is sitting at 36.5. And like Chris mentioned, with the weather as well, this may be like a 17-14, 14-10 type of final possibly here. But anybody catch your eye for that? All right, touchdown score.
Yeah, I think being at home, I give a slight edge to Nick Chubb. I think you can get him at plus 155. So even if he does go under, the rushing attempts, rushing yards, if they do get down to the end zone and score a touchdown, I think it could absolutely be realistic for Nick Chubb to get in, especially given the weather conditions, the wind. I don't think the offensive coordinators are going to want to play around too much. If they do get down there, I can see it being a pretty run heavy around the goal line. He has been the centerpiece, of course, since he's returned. He's had double-digit carries in all 4 games. Pittsburgh has allowed 7 rushing touchdowns over the last 5 games as well. So it's a pretty good matchup for him. I think there's a little bit of value on the plus 155 here, especially given the game script. On the opposite side, Najee, I think he's listed at about plus 130, I think, on a couple books. He's been a workhorse for the Steelers. 175 carries, 708 yards, 3 touchdowns this season, 6 explosive runs of 20 yards or more, showing the ability to, be able to break big plays, big run plays as well. And then again, going back to the running conditions, so the weather conditions. So I think that's going to lead to them being able to run the ball a little bit more. I mentioned Pittsburgh, second in the NFL in rushing attempts per game. So I like both of those. And if I was going to pick any wide receiver, it'd probably be George Pickens. This dude has been absolutely elite. 2 touchdowns in his last 4 games, 74 receiving yards in each one of those games. This is not a strong secondary for the Cleveland Browns. We saw Malik Neighbors get 2 touchdowns in the game that they played earlier this season. That's just right off the top of my head. But, yeah, they're giving it up. 15.6 catches. Yards per catch for George Pickens. So if he gets a big play, I can see him having an explosive one and getting into the end zone as well. I like George Pickens. I like Najee and Nick Chubb if I'm betting anybody on the Cleveland side.
Yeah, Najee makes a lot of sense here. Of course, even not getting it at plus money there. So I definitely do like that. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Pittsburgh Steelers defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown. I mean, pick 6 off of Jameis Winston. That's at plus 340 for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and special teams. David Njoku, I think, has been a great red zone target as well for the Cleveland Browns at plus 285. I don't hate that. And then I'll throw my guy Jalen Warren out there plus 225. Maybe he runs one in. Maybe he does have a receiving yard touchdown in this game. So I'll throw those 3 guys out there. Or those 3 touchdown scores for this game for Steelers and Browns. All right, Chris, let's wrap it up strong here. Let's get into our best bets here for the Thursday night football game. Where are you taking us for your best bet?
You know what? As much as I like to take running back props for Thursday night football, and I like to take unders most of the time, I'm actually gonna go Russell Wilson in this spot. I think I found something here. Russell Wilson under his 12.5 rushing yards. I think the number is a tad bit too high. Of course, you could go over this with one rush, but like I said, he hasn't been running the football a lot. Only either 3 or 4 rushes in the 4 games that he's played so far. He hasn't had more than 7 yards on the ground, and I think game script says that he doesn't have to yet again. The Browns, like I mentioned, they haven't played a lot of elusive running backs, and the ones that they have faced have been able to go up and over the number, but those are much more elusive guys than Russell Wilson, especially given the stage of his career. So Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels, yeah, but I mean, none of the other quarterbacks have had 10. So I like game script. I like the number. I think it's a tad bit too high. We'll go Russell Wilson under 12.5 rushing yards. Best bet here now.
Love it. All right, for my best bet, it's between Jalen Warren and Jameis Winston. I think I'll go Jalen Warren up and over the receiving yards of 13.5. Since we talked about since Russell Wilson has taken over as the starting quarterback here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that Jalen Warren has been involved in that passing game. And with the, I don't want to say limited amount of targets that he's gotten, but the targets that he has gotten up and over this number in 3 out of the last 4 games. In particular, the last 2 games, 29 against the Commanders, 27 against the Ravens, and also said that the Browns defense is also giving it up through the air to the running back position as well. So I know Jalen Warren is a pass catching back for this Pittsburgh Steelers backfield. So I do expect him to be involved, whether it's screen passes, check downs, swing passes, whatever the case might be for Jalen Warren. So Best number right now, like we talked about, up and over 13.5, and the number is on the move. So hopefully you guys can get to this sooner rather than later before this line does move there. So again, best bet, running back, Steelers, Jalen Warren over 13.5 receiving yards to round out NFL Week 12 to kick it off on Thursday Night Football. All right, and that is going to do it here for this edition of the Propcast, Thursday Night Football, to kick off Week 12. Chris, anything else you want to mention, my man, before we get out of here?
No, I think we did a pretty good job here, I'm excited for the game just because of the weather conditions in general, honestly. So I will be tuned in and watching. I like to see, defensive games. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm a big Mike Tomlin fan. I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I think they play the game the right way. So I'll be locked in for this one, and I hope that our viewers will as well. And hopefully we can put some money in their pockets and into their bankroll, and we can do the same for ourselves. Remember, whenever you're betting or whatever you're betting, to do it responsibly. And check us out on Friday. We'll be back to get into Week 12 props for Sunday Night Football. Well, Sunday football in general.
Yep, 100%. And we'll be back on Friday, so look out for us then. Yeah, definitely looking forward to this game here as well. I know the last couple of weeks we've seen some shootouts, but this game with a total of 36.5, maybe points out a little bit of a premium here in this game. So yeah, it should be a good one. We'll come back on Friday, recap the game briefly, and then we'll get into the Week 12 Sunday game player props, same place, same time. So if you haven't already subscribed to the Propcast on YouTube, please go ahead and do so. If you haven't subscribed, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple, please do so as well in the USA rating and review if you do not mind. All right. We'll be back Friday, like I mentioned. Enjoy the game on Thursday night. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off, and always remember to let it ride.